See, I want to tell you something. I want to blow your mind here with some revelation. Ready? Here's some new stuff. You never heard this before. You have never heard this before. This is new, and it's true, and you better get it. Ready? God is love. I just want to say it out there. God is love. He's the embodiment, the genuine originator of this idea of true love. And this idea that love can transform a heart, because when you get it real, love makes you do something. It doesn't take long to realize that our world is aching and they desire love in their life. It's all over the planet. You don't have to go far to see that every human heart desires to be loved and to be embraced and to be accepted. That's the truth. But when love is lost, rejection and hate surfaces. And can I remind all of us, rejection hurts. Hate destroys, and a heart void of love is destructive. And so we don't have it in our hearts, so we're okay throwing arrows and firing darts, and we're okay putting people in their place. We're okay as long as we're not committing adultery. Read James. Why don't you read James? Read James chapter 2. James is trying to tell that church, yeah, you've got one part of the law done right, but you got another part you're messing up. And if you've messed up one part of the law, you might as well forget it because you've blown the entire law. He says, you're just saying, well, because I don't go out and have affairs and I'm not sleeping around, I'm okay. And he said, no. James says, you're killing people. And because you don't have love in your heart, you're killing people. Church, I want you to understand me. Our world doesn't mind us fighting with one another, destroying one another. Our world doesn't mind that. In fact, the devil buys front row seats to that activity. But when we begin to love one another and be there for one another and support one another, can I tell you, there's something powerful that begins to take place. So you can't do this on your own. Romans 5:5, Romans 5:5. Powerful verse I want to share with you. I want this to get in your spirit. Romans 5:5 says, and hope maketh not ashamed. We love that part. Hope maketh not ashamed. Because. Everybody say because. Everybody say because. Because the love of God, get this, is shed abroad in your heart by the Holy Ghost. The love of God is shed abroad in your hearts by the Holy Ghost. You're never going to get smart enough and read enough books and get enough of personal self-awareness. You are never going to be clinically certified enough to understand what I'm telling you. But when you let the love of God be spread abroad in your heart, things begin to change. And you can't do this on your own. This is where the Holy Ghost matters. That's why we believe in speaking in tongues, because when we begin to speak in tongues, the activity of God's presence in our life begins to transform us, and the love of God begins to spread abroad in our hearts. Let me help you couples. Let me help you families. Let me help you individuals a little bit. You know what you need to do? You're fighting. You're condescending. You're critical of one another. You're picking on one another. You're blaming one another. You know what you need to do? You need a good dose of the Holy Ghost. You need to pray through, because a good praying through will allow the love of God to begin to be spread abroad in your heart. You need the Holy Ghost to begin to birth something new in your life. You need the Holy Ghost to begin to blow up some things in your spirit, some past hurts and wounds that you can't let go, wounds you can't forget, wounds that linger for a lifetime. The Holy Ghost begins to wash those out. And that's why maybe Paul said, I'm glad that I speak in tongues more than you. Because that man was put in prison. That man was beaten. That man was accused. That man was lied upon. But the reason he could love the way that God loved is because the Holy Ghost was operating in his life. You know what this church needs? I'll tell you what this church needs. We need the Holy Ghost to fall in our lives, in our marriages, in our homes, in our altars, in our church. We need a fresh touch of the Holy Ghost in our lives. That's what we need. We need the Holy Ghost to bathe us. We need the Holy Ghost to wash us. We need the Holy Ghost to transform our lives. And yeah, we're fine saying, God, I'm okay. Yet there's a truth. When the Holy Ghost begins to operate inside of you, when God's Spirit begins to take over you, it will compel you to love others. I mean, I love when I hear stories about this church loving one another. Sister Imes, would you just stand for a little bit? Stand. This woman just put her son in the ground not too long ago. She put her husband in the ground maybe a couple years ago. She has every reason to go find a cave and live in until she passes or the rapture comes. She has every reason. But that lady understands something that you need and I understand. She only lives if she'll love. So you've received cards. You've received her prayers. You've been blessed by her. I know she's quiet, but she's dangerous to heaven. I'm telling you right now. She's a warrior in heaven. I'm going to tell you. That's why. Sister Himes, I want to tell you thank you for loving people in this church the way you love. Because we're supposed to change the world. See, here's what I want you to understand. You may be seeing it, Sister Himes. This is where you have to understand. We're actually supposed to convince the world that we love one another. We're actually supposed to convince the world that we're different from them. We're actually supposed to convince the world that we're not like them. And the only way to do it is when we love. Sister Evelyn, would you stand? I can't tell you how many cards, how many times she's come along families, blessed them with money, blessed them with encouragement, with prayers. Can't tell you. And she can tell you her own struggles and her own battles and her own things that she has every reason to go and find a soft place to land and kind of camp out for a while. But no, Sister Heflin knows. If you're going to be in the love and the hands and the breath of God, you're going to have to love and you're going to have to play hurt. You're going to have to love when things are not well in your life, Sister Heflin. You've learned that when you could be going through cancer in your family, but you have to learn when there's things that you still got to do, the love of God, and you have to spread it abroad. Humans don't do that. I'm going to tell you what does that. It's the power of the Holy Ghost that does things like that. Thank you, Sister Heflin. Thank you. I can point out families, hear me, I can point out families and individuals. I can show you people that have come alongside and have been there and held one another and lifted up one another's hands. I want to tell you, that's how the world is ever going to be convinced that living for God is better than what the world has. That's our job. We're supposed to convince the world. So here's my challenge. Brother Dago, if you can make your way here, this is my challenge. Why don't we be famous for our love for each other? Why don't we become famous? When love is right, it will bring us together. Love will really, truly build. This is what I want you to hear me. Please hear me. Every great move of God that has ever happened, every great move of God that has ever happened has been marked by a deep love for one another. It's easy to speak about faith, but I'm going to tell you our next dimension as a church. You ready? I'm going to tell you what the future looks like as this church becomes an example of what it is to stick by one another and hold one another up and believe in one another and love one another through thick and thin. Yeah, we're not all perfect, and we got some scars, and there's some issues among us. And yes, there are people that don't get it right in this church, and they don't understand, and they have not been revived. I get it. And there are some people that are struggling, but I'm going to tell you, let them go and trip over our love for them as they walk out that door. Let there be a spirit and an environment and an atmosphere that says, whosoever will. Whosoever will. Whosoever.